and Senator Bragg. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Senator Bragg.
Look, thanks very much. I just want to ask you about a few tax issues. No personal tax issues, don't worry. Now, in relation to the franking bill, there was a franking bill that the Senate produced a very good report on. Senator Smith and I were part of, and as a result of that inquiry, which of course Senator Walsh was also a party, the last estimates, I'm just trying to find the right piece of paper, and I can't find it, so I'm going to have to paraphrase, which is always risky. No, I found it. Ms Brown, we had a discussion about the franking matter, and you said there were definitely some suggestions in the amendments around some tightening that could be considered. That's what you said last estimates. So I was wondering whether you could give me any more information now.
I think we can. I mean, Mr Boltz, who's the best place to do that?
Yes, thank you. So first I would like to thank the senators for the report.
It's one of the services we provide.
and the report into the bill. And I think, as we have previously discussed, the first version of the bill that we put out probably did not achieve the right balance between targeting that egregious behaviour that had been the subject of the taxpayer alert without impacting on the ordinary activities, commercial activities of businesses. And we've since made changes both before it was introduced. So we've made changes before it was introduced to work on that, but then I think through the inquiry there are a number of suggestions made. So we've been, I think, working with the government, advising the government following your report, and the government has not yet announced its decision in relation to the bill.
Okay, but effectively your position is, or the position of the government is, that the initial drafting was flawed.
The first bill that we put out, we attempted to find that balance between as I said, tackling that egregious behaviour that had been identified in the taxpayer alert and not impeding on the ordinary activity. And I think we agreed. We made some changes before the bill was introduced, and then you senators have identified and made a number of recommendations in relation to it.
Okay. Now, how much was this new taxation measure going to raise?
So we've had these discussions before, Senator. That you're aware that the costing of the bill was the $10 million.
Based on 2016 data, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we had the discussion last time with Mr Hirschhorn and I think it was Marty Robinson, who's my boss, who couldn't be here today, and Ms Brown, about the difference between a budget costing and what the ATO might see.
Yeah.
So the taxpayer alert was issued very early after some activity was seen. We had some cases there that were informing our costing.
I was wondering how much it was going to raise.
The 10 million. But as the ATO and Mr Hirschhorn may remember saying that, from their perspective, you could have individual transactions were they to happen that could cost more than that. And Mr Hirschhorn, I might see if you want to add anything.
That's can I say that's exactly, I think, our testimony from last time.
Okay, so I'm asking you that because there was a costing done that was in the budget, and I'm wondering whether or not, with the changes you're now going to make to your own legislation, how that will affect that particular budget number.
We will need to wait and see when the government, when the changes to the bill, if any, are announced by the government.
Okay, but basically the number that's in the budget's not likely to be right, is it?
I think the number in the budget reflects the intent of the measure, and I don't think the intent's meant to change, so some new words in the amendment may not have any impact on the costing, because it is about the activity that we were seeing, and that was what the costing was based on.
But hang on, it does matter. It does matter how you draft a measure.
It does, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the costing was about the activity that we were seeing, that the ATO was seeing.
I understand that, but if the measure is fundamentally different, and it sounds like it will be, I mean, it's not often that the Treasury Department comes to Senate estimates and says that we tried to draft it this way and we recognise that it was flawed, the costing and therefore the budget number will be different.
Or
are you saying it's going to be the same?
I think it could be the same because it is about the activity that the ATO is seeing, and the drafting is to reflect the contrived arrangements we were trying to capture at that point.
Okay. So, Minister, when are you going to make a decision about this franking disaster?
Well, I don't accept it's a franking disaster.
It's a mess.
I do accept that we take reports of the Senate seriously, and the Senate has identified some areas for further consideration, and we'll consider that before proceeding with the legislation.
Okay, so that tax bill is not so flash, is it? Now, how about this thin cap bill? How's that looking? We have to amend that one as well?
The thin cap bill.
Sounds like it's a yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Has been amended since it was consulted on.
So, will you stick with these debt creation rules in that bill?
Yes, the debt creation rules are a fundamental integrity.
So you stick with those, will you, even though they haven't been consulted on before?
I might let Ms Davey answer that question. Has there been a bill that's been released for consultation or amendments?
Yes, Catherine Davey, Acting First Assistant Secretary of Corporate and International Tax Division. Yes, the debt deduction creation rules were included to support the integrity of the thin capitalisation regime, and they were intended to address debt deductions arising from debt creation schemes that lack genuine commercial justification. So while the strengthened thin capitalisation rules targeted excessive debt deductions by using a cap, the changes don't prevent the creation of schemes that would allow artificial debt deductions within that cap. So the rules were important, and this was investigated further by the Senate committee, and following the release of the Senate committee, the government has released parliamentary amendments to the bill, and it is making adjustments in line with the recommendation of the committee, including some changes to the debt deduction creation rules to deal with unintended consequences.
Okay, so that's 2 out of 2. 2 bills out of 2 need big amendments. That's good. Now, what about the... Are you able to answer any questions about the OBU replacement?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're able to?
So I think we asked you a question about that. Was it in June? Is that right? We asked you a question about OBU in June?
I can't recall, Senator, sorry.
Apologies, Senator, I wasn't...
16th, we asked you 16th of June about whether you'll replace the OBU. Have you answered that question?
We have recently answered the
when did you
question
answer it?
on notice, but I will take you through it now, Senator.
When did you answer the question?
I think that we answered that one in the last week or so.
Oh, okay, it's convenient. So what's the story here? Because there's the industry say that there's a couple of thousand jobs hanging off these schemes. So when will you replace the OBU, do you think?
So as you will be aware, the former government repealed the OBU regime after it was found to be harmful by the Forum of Harmful Tax Practices, the OECD.
Yeah, I understand the background.
And the European Union was... had started draft legislation to put sanctions on Australia's securitisation. So to stop European investors investing in Australia's securitisation instruments.
Yeah, I understand the background, yep.
The former government did say that it would consult on a potential replacement to the OBU regime.
How's that going?
So Treasury meets from time to time. So Treasury met at that time quite a lot, as you can imagine, with participants of the OBU industry, and Treasury does meet from time to time with participants of the OBU industry to discuss. The trick is, I think, with this is the designing something that would replace the OBU regime, but that does not fall foul of the OECD rules.
Yeah. So what's the timetable?
It was a commitment of the former government to consult on this, so this government hasn't made a timetable.
When does the grandfathering end?
So the grandfathering was up until the 22-23 income years, so that is coming to an end or has come to an end for the OBUs depending on their income year.
Okay, so what does that mean for those businesses?
So some of those businesses, it's a commercial decision, obviously, for all of those businesses. The OBU community is quite varied, doing lots of different types of activities. For some of them, the OBU desk is a small part of a very large organisation, so it all depends. Some of them will continue to do those business in Australia and instead be subject to Australia's normal corporate tax rate, and others may make a commercial decision in a different way. So it's up to the individual businesses.
I just want to ask one more question, then I'll shut up. So I guess what I'm trying to understand is, what are you saying to these businesses that are employing a lot of Australians, particularly in the professional services and financial areas of Sydney and Melbourne, I imagine mainly? What are you saying to them about your agenda to replace the OBU? Are you saying that it'll be dealt with within a year, or what are your... Because it feels like this is not a high priority for the government. It's taken you 6 months to answer a question to a pretty simple answer. So I don't have a whole lot of confidence that you're managing this well. So what are you saying to this industry?
So we've been having discussions with those who have been remaining interested in these dialogues. We've been talking about the OECD rules. So there have been a number of suggestions made. You yourself, I know, made a suggestion to a regime. So we've been talking about the OECD rules and looking at how those OECD rules would fit into the suggestions made. Working with the industry to understand, what are the guardrails that the OECD has in place, and how that impacts on the suggestions that have come forward.
And they're not
Thank
shedding
you.
jobs at this juncture?
Thank you, Senator Bragg.
Okay.
Senator Henderson.
Thank you, Ms. Jones.